to the Middleton City Hall. We got beautiful reds and other colors here. You guys are all great. And I'm going to call the meeting of the Middleton Common Council for December 4th, 2018 to order. And the first item is the roll call.
Ewan.
Here.
Burke.
Here.
Teal.
Here.
West.
Present.
Olson.
Here.
Ramsey.
Here.
Sullivan.
Here.
Richard.
Here.
Okay, next one is the comments from the citizens present, those who want to speak. So you have it, and you would like to speak? Okay, yes, Sherry.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay. My name
Identify
is,
yourself
Okay.
and your address, and you got 3 minutes.
okay, I won't take that long. My name is Sherry Tice. I live at 3600 Glen Lane in Middleton, and I live right behind the Bertrand Auto Works shop that you're going to be talking about tonight. We've been dealing with this situation since 1993, so it's been 25 years of problems with this neighbor. The original agreement that was signed in 2010 apparently had no teeth in it. We were very hopeful at that time that we would get some remedy from this, but he was never in compliance with that agreement, and it has taken an inordinate amount of city resources and neighborhood angst that we've all been dealing with. So this agreement that you're going to look at tonight, it's a huge compromise for our neighborhood. We have given in to so many different things that we're not completely comfortable with, but we at least want to get an agreement on the table. In exchange, we expect him to totally adhere to that agreement, and we expect the city to hold him completely accountable for every line of that agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. So, Aaron, you want to speak? He's speaking for all of them, so he will have 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes, whatever he likes. So. Well, within limits. So I think
I'll keep it short.
more than 3,
Thank you.
less
I will
than
keep
6. 6 will be 2 people. So
I'll keep it short. My name is
Yes.
Aaron Harris. I'm the chief of the Middleton Fire District. With me are some of our fire officers.
let's give them
firefighters.
all a big hand. So
Tonight in front of you is a decision for the council to make. Some proposals have been placed in front of you from city planning, public works. Strand and Associates is going to be presenting as well. We were kind of brought into this at the 11th hour and found that obviously this affected the decision affected our operation. We have a concern for safety, and that safety concern is real. It has been minimalized over time by some to be shortened to as much as saying that this concern is about us displaying fire apparatus during 9/11 commemorations. It's never been what it's about. It's about us not being struck while we respond, while we operate, and while we train, and yes, when we do commemorations on the front apparatus bay. We were informed initially that the roadway was going to potentially shift towards the Middleton Fire Department by 2 feet, and then it went to upwards 15 feet downwards. That is concerning because we have been struck before, one resulting in the death of an individual inside of our fire station. I know when you were at our station for Citizens Academy, we were also nearly struck when a car veered off the roadway and luckily struck a tree, which will also be removed as part of this project. We want safety. We want safety for our personnel when they train, when they respond, and when we educate the citizens of our community. There have been 3, it's been reduced to 3 proposals, option 1, 2, and 3. I think Public Works has opted to go with option 1, Planning Commission option 2, and the Fire District had voted for option 3, which would not affect the fire department. Our concern is that if you do go with our option, it's not the safest. If you go with option 2, again, I do not believe it is the safest. Option 1, per Tom Stetzer, Sean Stowski, the engineers who put all the time and effort into this, is the safest option. We are not in favor of it as a whole, but with safety considerations that could be added to this, it could be safe for everyone. And the street could be safe, the sidewalk could be safer, and our operation could be safer as well. We have outlined, per the request of the mayor, those considerations, and I'll just state a few of them. Safety signs, speed signs in both directions, causing traffic to be aware of what they are doing. I know this is engineered and designed for faster speed. The posted speed is not what they travel in front of our facility. We'd like them to at least be aware and potentially have traffic calming measures in place for that. I think a rumble strip along the front of our apparatus bay, rumble strip being as you veer off the side of the roadway, they are at least made aware of it before coming into contact with any of our apparatus and potential personnel. Message signs, allowing them to be known when we are responding, returning, or training. They're all, I think, very feasible options, economical options, and in turn, we can give an easement or a dedicated sidewalk access so that a sidewalk connectivity can also be realized in this process. Currently, the sidewalk goes nowhere. We witnessed today, again, an individual, a young man walks to the intersection, is heading west, and walks out into the middle of the island and realizes he's in the sea of concrete and surrounded by traffic. I think as part of this, and one of our requests is that they reconsider or consider having a crosswalk at the intersection of Cayuga Street and University Avenue. Again, currently, the sidewalk, there's no way, as proposed in option number 1, the sidewalk ends away from the Middleton Fire Department and leaving us in a sea of inaccessibility. I think, again, I have those options laid out here. I'll hand those out momentarily. But between speed signs, some colored concrete for the sidewalk, right now pedestrians walk along and they're in a sea of concrete of our apron. They don't know where they're at or where they're going. I think it has to be removed anyways. When it is replaced, that it be put back as a dark gray in color, so they also, as people drive by, they can see a visual barrier between our facility and the roadway. I do appreciate the communication headed up by Mr. Davis as of late. I think we're making good strides to have compromise with both the planning, public works, and hopefully the city council as well. We're all having to give up something here. I do agree, again, I go with Mr. Stetzer's recommendation. I trust that man. I think that he's put together the right design for the public and for us, as long as the safety concerns be addressed as well. Thank you.
Any questions to Aaron, if anybody wants to ask quick one?
I just had one question.
Okay.
Was there any consideration of bollards, Aaron, in the design?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Are you asking
Yes.
for that as part of the safety precaution too?
Yes, bollards would be installed on the both east and west side of our property. Bollards, for those who are not familiar, would be a metal post that if a vehicle were to veer off the roadway, would strike a bollard versus striking us. And as of right now, what saved us the last time was a tree, and those trees are being removed. One other item, item number 9 that I do feel I need to address is our concern for snow removal. We are currently prohibited from removing snow to the, across the roadway. And we would ask for a signed agreement between the city and the fire district so that we can pass that snow along University Avenue directly south of our facility, off of our front apron, because it causes sightline issues. When we build up the snow, when we respond, the public can't see us responding and we can't see them coming close to us. I think it would be a very simple solution, but we would need to have an agreement so that we can take it off of our property and across the way. That area, by the way, is going to be, the right-of-way is growing. Currently, it is more of a turn lane, as proposed by Strand and Associates, that would become a wider area for us to do so. Thank you.
Any other questions? Susan?
Aaron, when was this latest accident?
It was this past summer. I would ask Battalion Chief Subra. It was at our last Citizens Academy.
Recent.
Yep. The young man, inattentive driving, drove off the roadway, struck a tree while we were there. Luckily, was not injured severely. Had that tree not been there, bollards we asked to be put in place would prevent that in the future.
Any other questions to Aaron? Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Anybody else who wants to speak? Okay, so we can come back to the approval of the consent agenda a little bit later. How about if we go to the resolution number 1, and this is honoring the Middleton High School swim team, swimming and diving team. This is their 3rd consecutive year of championship, state championship, and Elder Joanna Richard is going to read it. So,
Can we have the swim team come up to the front so we can all, while we're reading this? So while you're walking up, I want to say that, you know, I'm old enough to know that I was one of the first generations for Title IX, so it allowed me to play basketball and volleyball and softball. And I know how much a difference it's made in my life, and I can't imagine 3 years of excellence that you've achieved. And I just think it's extraordinary. So please, I want to apologize if I mispronounce your names. I did get a little coaching, see if the coaching worked for me. So celebrating and honoring the Middleton High School girls swimming and diving team on their 3rd consecutive state championship. Whereas on Saturday, November 10th, 2018, the Middleton High School girls swim team won their 3rd consecutive state championship. And whereas their championship was secured with a dominating points performance, as Middleton's 249.5 points were 61.5 more than the 2nd place team. And whereas the team of Gabriella Pierbon Mays, Berkeley Smith, Hannah Egeter, and McKenna Licking won the 200-yard freestyle relay. And whereas Hannah Egeter won the 500-yard freestyle and finished 2nd in the 200-yard freestyle, in addition to winning both of these events during the sectional qualifying. And whereas the team of Gabriella Pierbon Mays, Allie Silvestri, Hannah Egeter, and Berkeley Smith finished 2nd in the 200-yard medley relay. And whereas Allie Silvestri notched a 2nd place finish in the 100-yard breaststroke, 4th in the 200-yard individual medley. And whereas McKenna Licking secured a 3rd place finish in the 500-yard freestyle and 5th in the 200-yard freestyle. And whereas Gabriella Pierbon Mays finished 4th in the 100-yard butterfly, which I think is the toughest, toughest stroke, and 4th in the 100-yard backstroke. And whereas Alex Anagastopoulos, did I get close to that? Yeah. Secured a 5th place finish in the 100-yard breaststroke and 14th in the 200-yard individual medley. And whereas Berkeley Smith took 6th place finish in the 50-yard freestyle, Emily Keebler finished 6th in the 200-yard individual medley, while Cora Mack finished 13th in the 100-yard freestyle. And whereas Madeline Lawn competed in the 200-yard individual medley and Amanda George competed in the 500-yard freestyle. And whereas this victory is a testament to the sacrifice, hard work, and dedication from the swimmers, from swim coach Lauren Sabaka, from diving coach Kelsey Stam, and from assistants Danielle Finley, R.J. Lieferman, and Hannah Hippen. Now therefore be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Middleton, Wisconsin, that we honor and celebrate the 3rd consecutive state championship for the hardworking and talented swimmers and coaches of the Middleton High School girls swimming and diving team. And Mr. Mayor, I move this resolution forward with my support.
Okay, I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So let's give them a big hand.
Everybody introduce themselves.
Can we get a picture of the city council?
Could you introduce yourself?
Now is it on? Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you so much to the council and to everybody who was here. And a big thank you to our firefighters who were there. Our drivers on the, I'll use my coach voice. Some of our drivers on the fire truck escort after, and we so appreciate everything that you guys do, obviously for our city and for our community, but for Middleton High School Athletics also. It's such a great tradition that we have. So thank you to those of you that were there. And it's been an honor, such a pleasure, such a joy to coach these girls. And as you said, the sacrifice that they give every single day to be a part of our team and do everything that we ask them to do, and just remain so humble and classy and just so centered in who they are as young women. And I could not be more proud to be their coach every single day. So thank you, girls. We're so proud of you. And thank you, everybody who's here. Yeah, we'll stand. So I should have started. I'm Lauren Sabalka, and I'm my coach. And Danielle Finley, I'm the assistant coach.
Yay.
I'm Hannah Hager. Emily Keebler. Maddie Long. I'm Berkeley Smith.
Anybody else in the picture? All right, everybody else. Mayor? All right, thank you.
She's so cute.
We don't want to show them
Yeah.
oh my. Those athletes.
I think she wants to hang out.
Thanks. Thanks for coming. Bye. She's adorable.
Okay, now we're going to go to the proclamation. And is anybody from Midwest Ballet Academy here? Okay, well, it's honoring Central Midwest Ballet Academy, whereas the city of Middleton, home to the Central Midwest Ballet Academy, recognizes the Academy's performances of the Little Matchstick Girl at the Bartle Theater in Madison, Wisconsin on December 14th, 15th, 16th, 2018, and whereas the Little Matchstick Girl, an original ballet adapted specifically for the Central Midwest Ballet Academy from the Hans Christian Andersen tale, highlights the skills of dancers at their current development, and whereas the lessons of the dancers go beyond the dance floor, and whereas the performance experience enhances the dancer's self-esteem and positive self-image, and whereas the dancers are a team of individuals working on stage as ambassadors of ballet, and whereas the performance of the Bartle Theatre allows the students to develop the creativity and experience the joy and artistry of dance. Now therefore, I, Mayor Gurdeep Brar, hereby urge all citizens to support the efforts of the Central Midwest Ballet Academy and its efforts to strengthen our city's cultural offerings. Further, I urge all citizens to take part in such diverse cultural events to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of the present and future generation. I probably will go to one of their performances. So, need a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second? All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So motion passes. All right. So approval of the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of approval of the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so it passes. So let's move on to the, I think we all agree on item number 3. We have several people here. This is the settlement agreement and order with James T. Batrang, doing business as Auto Works Unlimited. You want to say anything, or, well,
I'll move approval as
okay,
recommended by the
need a
Finance Committee.
second?
Second.
Okay, any questions or concerns? Okay, all those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Now we want to move on to the bigger things here. That's item number 3, University Avenue, Cayuga Park reconstruction preliminary design issues.
What number is that?
This is under miscellaneous, item number 1, the firefighters and all of that folks here.
The
Okay.
road construction.
Road construction.
Oh, are we moving ahead? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, well, we have a lot of people here, so I thought it may be best that we go to that, so. Is that okay?
Yes. Move approval is recommended by Public Works.
Okay?
Okay.
Oh, you already seconded? Okay, so now do we want to, yes, Susan?
We have discussion?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
First we can.
Okay, so there's, motion is made and it's seconded, and let's have a discussion. So Susan, begin.
Yeah, I received a phone call last night from the chair of the Bike Ped Committee with concerns about the different options in terms of pedestrian safety at the intersection of University and Parmenter. And as I understand it, the Bike Ped Committee has not seen this proposal since within the last several months, or at least the more recent proposals. So I would recommend that it be referred to Bike Ped Committee. I'd like to actually substitute a motion for that so they can look at it in terms of pedestrian safety. I think that will also address a lot of the issues that the fire department has in terms of
Did you say
incorporating.
Parmenter and University?
Yeah, Parmenter and University and Cayuga. The Bike Ped Committee, or the chair, is very concerned about pedestrian safety in this whole area.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Just on discussion on that, I'm a little concerned that I don't think Bike Ped is gonna be meeting in December, so that means probably end of January then for their next scheduled meeting. So I'm just a little concerned that this would then put the, behind on design work that we need to get out so we can get an RFP out for the construction, bids. So, were we asking the Bike Ped Committee to have an emergency meeting that they could do next week, or can we put some parameters on it?
Yeah, Mike, do you know the time frame for the bidding and so on?
Look on the schedule.
But also, they can provide input, so, I mean, it's, this has been in the process for many
No, I
months.
think Mike's looking at, I want to know what's the time frame for the bidding of the project? Not when the
Sean-
Bike Ped's
John
meeting.
can tell you.
John, go ahead.
Tom can tell you.
Yeah,
Much like the first phase, the construction will be predominantly self-performed by the county highway crew. They will be bidding portions of it, like removal of existing pavement, curb and gutter, that sort of thing, asphalt. So the project bidding isn't a city bid project, if you will, but we are intending for the county to get to bids in January for the sub work that they need to be done. If modifications to some signal equipment need to be done, that's on us. That's a separate contract that's going to have to be bid out because the county doesn't do signals. But again, that's on a pretty expedited time frame. The overall goal being to get into construction from mid-April and to be done essentially by July 4th weekend.
So you're saying it needs to go out really quickly. How do we incorporate then the suggestions of the fire department, concerns of the bike ped?
Some of that's outside the curb lines, we're gonna have to do separate anyway. So we're gonna have to hire a separate contractor for things outside the curb lines. And what we really wanted to do was resolve the different recommendations for road alignment tonight. Because right now, we had 3 differing opinions on that, and that's really what we wanted the council to dive into.
These safety issues can be addressed later.
If we get some detail to them, yes, we can include them in the design as we're going. This is still a preliminary design stage,
That's what I was thinking.
but we're moving forward. So waiting to move forward until January would be a concern.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
To address Joanna's question, the bike ped committee is not scheduled for any time in December currently.
They're not scheduled for any time, but there have been discussions about having a meeting yet this month
To address this issue.
to go over some of these safety concerns, yes.
And it would be okay, they can provide their input and it can still, all we are really proving the design between A, B, and C, and the fire department, they have agreed to design A, and which was recommended by the Public Works as well. And it was the same design which was recommended in October as well. So I think there were already 2-3 months to provide some input, so. Anyway, any other questions or
Well,
comments?
Dan is a member of the bike ped committee.
Yep.
I'm a member too.
And
Well,
Kathy too?
Our chairman's concern was sidewalk,
Right.
big concern of his. And the other concern of his was the cross from Cayuga across University, that intersection. And as a side discussion, the entire corridor for pedestrian safety. But for this particular issue, his concern was, and I think all of our concern is pedestrian safety. So if I'm understanding the compromise, the fire district will, in lieu of these conditions, the fire district would give us a sidewalk easement so that we could put in a sidewalk along there. Am I understanding that correctly, Aaron?
In speaking to the commissioners, I think they would be in favor of that as well. I wouldn't be here speaking if I didn't have their guidance on that. So yes.
And then Sean, for the second part of the concern, and fire commission's concern too, with the crosswalk then from Cayuga across University, is that something that Bike and Ped can discuss and that wouldn't change your bidding at all? Or is that something that you need to know?
That wouldn't be a big enough element to throw off bids. That's something we could still work on.
And also pedestrian safety features at Parmenter and University.
Well,
The
pedestrian countdown timers will be included in the signal design. That's a pretty standard thing now.
This is stuff
and-
that bike ped's not fully aware of.
Okay.
At least the
And-
non-Public Works members.
And I know the Public Works Committee previously had looked just at the Aurora Street University Avenue crosswalk and had recommended against it because signalized intersections were nearby, and we couldn't find a way to make that crosswalk
Right.
so recognizable to a driver
Yeah.
who's between two signal sets that we felt we could make it adequately safe. But if Ped Bike has some ideas on that, that'd be great.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I'd like Ped Bike to see it, but I don't have a real issue
Yeah, I'm
on a design.
willing, in terms of the three options, to go ahead and vote on that, but then I'd like to make a second motion to vote on separately
Okay,
to refer it to the
okay,
Bike Ped
yeah,
Committee.
we could do that
That's
after
fine.
this, so.
That's fine.
Okay, all right, so all those in favor of the motion,
That's what we're
You've
going
Yeah.
already, that motion has already been made and seconded, which is, my motion was to approve what Public Works agreed to.
Right.
So you don't have to go over it again. You don't have to go do that again.
no, she wanted to make a additional
Wanted to make a
motion
second
afterwards,
motion
so.
For the whole thing,
Okay.
Bike Ped.
Oh.
Okay,
When do you think you're gonna have a meeting?
We're not going to delay this vote
We're not
regardless.
going, yeah.
Okay.
okay, all those in favor of this
Probably next week.
motion, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. And thank you, guys, you have done a phenomenal
Pradeep,
job,
we
and
need to
thank
do
you
the
to
second
Aaron
motion.
Harris for working with me. Now, we had 2 long meetings, and I think what we have reached is really good. Yes.
We need to do the second motion.
Okay, yeah, well, if you want to make a motion, make a
I
motion.
did.
sir. Okay,
It
need
was
a second.
seconded.
Did somebody second it?
Yes.
And I think so.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay.
I also think we should make these referrals to Public Works too, so we can go through the
Yes.
list and
Okay.
get
I
those
agree.
addressed.
So
Yeah.
is that part of it, or?
Yep, I think
Yes.
it should be, yeah.
Okay, all right, so any questions or comments on the second motion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, which is to refer it to the Bike and Ped and include this part of the discussion, say aye.
Aye.
Public Works.
Send this to,
That needs to,
okay.
that's what Joanna just
Okay, Bike and
asked.
Ped and to the Public Works.
Right.
Yes, okay. Okay, again, all those in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Okay, guys, let's give this guy another big hand here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys do a great job.
There's some ladies in there too.
Okay,
And women.
He's got it.
now we are on to the regular agenda under agreements, item number 1,
Agreements number 1.
which is the Middleton Utility District number 1, the Community of Bishop Bay Amendment to Agreement 15127.
Move approval is recommended by
Fiddlesticks.
finance.
Second.
Okay, any questions,
Yeah, no, I
any
get that.
discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Next one is approval of proposal from Fred Kolkman for design services related to Stricker Park tennis courts.
Move approval is recommended by finance. Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. Now we are on to the staff proposal for a process continuing negotiations with 2 developers that responded to the request for proposal for Parliamentary Clark Street properties. Anybody wants to, is staff here to make a presentation, or Eileen?
Well, not to make a presentation unless you want one, but the idea
No,
is
No, I
that,
think we have.
okay,
talked to
yeah.
Katie, so-
You directed us to negotiate, and one of the things we wanted to do before we started that process with the 2 developers who had responded to the RFP was make sure you were okay with the information we were asking them for. And the intent would be to ask them for these things, most of which are already included in the RFP. The pro forma information is not, but we felt that was important to help evaluate the financial aspects of the deal. And so what we would propose is that if you approve this, we provide it to the 2 developers and ask them that they get us that information by January 2nd. And then we would, as a staff, evaluate it and negotiate with them and bring back the results of that negotiation, hopefully on January 15th at your meeting.
So you need us to approve the timeline?
The timeline and just the information that we're requesting. We just wanted to make as transparent as possible that we would be requesting that, so.
I have a question for maybe you, Matt.
I'll move that, make that motion so we can discuss it.
Okay, need a second.
Second.
So I have a question for Matt maybe. So is RFP simply a guideline or it's a legal document? In the RFP, we ask that the city would want the $2.63 million which city had paid for the land upfront. So you probably are not familiar with this proposal, looks like from your face.
Only generally, I haven't looked at
Okay.
the specifics, but.
Okay,
I mean,
but in general, you would know that if there's a, city sends a request for proposal, is that sort of a binding, legal, or what is the, in this case, one of the biggest requirement was that the city paid $2.63 million for that piece of land, that city would want that money upfront. That was one of the requirements.
Well, I envision that from this request for proposals that we would, if we accept some, we would have a final agreement that we would negotiate. I don't know that all of the details from our
Okay.
request.
Okay.
Of course, I haven't looked at the request, I don't know if I've ever been given the request for proposals to know
Probably
whether that
haven't.
is the kind of detail, but typically for this type of development project, it's, we're looking for the broad outlines of what it is that they're proposing, consistent with what we have, and if we accept that, then we would negotiate a more detailed agreement is exactly what it is we.
But you will have that part.
Matt, I think what he's trying to ask you is that if someone does not meet the specifications of the RSP, is it non-responsive and that we should throw it out?
Yeah, if you haven't.
I understand you haven't
Sure.
seen the document, but on its
As
face.
a general proposition, yes, if you receive a response to an RFP that does not meet your requirements, typically, yeah, you would not consider it. But, I mean, of course, you
Yeah,
can always,
Yeah,
go
so-
back, sometimes you send out RFPs and you think you're gonna get a bunch of responses and you get something different. But, yeah, if it's
So
not what you like, you
in a
would
case
reject
like
it.
that, wouldn't it be more appropriate than to rebid the entire thing?
Changes.
Send it back out to RFP.
Yeah, with the,
So I just want to make sure that we understand that it's not a bid, it's an RFP. So a bid comes with very stringent requirements. An RFP does not. So just let's make sure that we divide those things up and not call it a bid. It was a request for proposal.
Right, yeah, this should not be treated like a public contract bidding, if that's what you're
No,
asking.
I'm not asking that, but we put forth a set of essentially, what we tried to do is codify our expectations into an RFP. And if developers, in submitting a response to that, could not meet them, shouldn't we disallow the entire process and start over? Or are we obligated to only deal with those that meet the requirements of the RFP?
I don't think I don't see any way you're obligated to do it. If you have not gotten something that's responsive, and this is really a policy concern, do you think you've asked the right questions and do you think you've gotten the right responses? And if one of those two, answers those questions or no, I think as a matter of policy, the council goes back and either asks the right questions or does what it needs to get the right responses. Outside of specifics, I'm not sure how to answer the question, but this isn't a public bidding sort of scenario whereby there's the same level of formality of this wasn't entirely responsive, so we are going to reject this. But I mean, if you've given out a RFP with certain details and you think that somebody's responded with something completely different, that maybe if everyone else knew we were accepting this, that they might also provide a response, then I would suggest that it would be a good policy to open it back up and allow people to provide response to those additional elements if you are interested in receiving that.
Yeah, but
Out of fairness.
Out of fairness,
Well, not just fairness, but also the whole point of getting RFPs is to get the best price, and the best sort of proposals. And if, you know, there could be better proposals out there that you didn't receive because, you know, they didn't know that they could propose whatever it is that you're now looking at. So, I mean, it's in the city's interest as well, not just fairness to developers. What?
And also, is it not a question of trust? If city says something and then does quite the other?
It could be. I mean, we're talking in the abstract.
Yeah, okay, Kathy, you have a,
yeah, I just wanted to say when the gentleman from Vanderwald was here last week, last meeting, and he said that he had sent this out to a couple people, and they didn't feel like responding back because of the parameters of paying it all up front. And if we're not going to accept that, I mean, they should have another option, another turn to kick at the can.
yeah, actually, I talked to our staff handling this. She said there may be lots of, well, she said at least 15, 20 people interested, and we could possibly get 5 proposals out of those.
I mean, I think it's always in the city's interest if
That's
there's.
changing the parameters.
I know, so that's why, that's exactly what I'm saying, that we said we are going to ask for $2.63 million, the money which city paid upfront. So now if we say that, you know, you don't really have to pay that, so for me personally, it's a question of trust, and it's actually changing what you said you were going to do.
Not following.
I think
Well,
what you're trying to get
what is there
is-
to follow? It's-
At this point in time, we have one respondent that met the requirements of
No,
the RFP.
no, that's not true. There were parts of both proposals that did not meet the requirements of the RFP.
Right.
That is the actual facts. Don't try to change it, the facts, to meet your argument right now, because that is not true.
The first requirement of the RFP.
That's
No.
one requirement.
One
First
requirement.
requirement of the
One.
RFP, the gatekeeper
Let him
of the
finish, then you-
RFP
okay.
was to pay back the city the purchase price of that property. That is the gatekeeper. If you can't get through that threshold, then all bets are off. And
Mark,
people
you're-
here want
Just
to,
one
to,
minute.
to
Let him
say
finish, please.
that you have to take things in totality. And that's not what this council agreed to at the onset. It said, first and foremost, the threshold to meet is to pay back the initial purchase price.
Okay, Susan.
I have a problem with that being the only
I
requirement.
didn't say the only, I said the
Just
initial
let her
threshold.
finish, please. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Susan.
There were 3 requirements in there, and we can't make it based on a single requirement. Or there were multiple requirements. I don't remember the exact
Yes.
number. But I'm having trouble with this idea of we accept a proposal that meets only one of the requirements.
Eileen.
Well, I think one of the things we were understanding from the last council meeting is that you'd like us to try to standardize, because both respondents did do some changing with their proposal almost from the very beginning in terms of some of the things that they were proposing. So what we're trying to do as staff is standardize that so that we can evaluate it. What are you proposing to pay? When? What are you proposing to build? What would that yield to the city? And then we would bring that information back. That doesn't mean that the council would have to choose one or the other. You could at that point say, well, we think we should just redo it. But we were just hoping from what you had said last time that you wanted us to try to lay it all out, because things were changing almost daily. And not for the worse, they were changing for the better, but we wanted to be able to evaluate something standard. Is that?
Okay, any other?
When do you propose to have that?
They
We're
have the
proposing to
timeline.
get the information from them by January 2nd, and then evaluate it and bring it back here at your January 15th meeting, which I think is your only meeting in January.
Well, it's also, you know, I think I don't want a developer to be spending time and money if we think their proposal is really not responsive. So I mean, they have to spend a lot of time and money in doing this. So we have to be fair to them as well. But that's how I see it. So, any other questions or comments? Yes, Robert.
I think this is kind of already in here, but if we were to approve this, the third one down under project details is breakdown of number of units by type, studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. I assume that would also include rental versus townhouse versus whatever.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
And also, how many of each of those units would be workforce, if that was going to be included as a component?
Right, I think affordable housing components,
how
we
it
have
would
that.
break
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, oh, that's good.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So what's the motion is to prove the timeline. That's all we are really proving, right?
That in this process, that we were just trying to, again, to respond to what you all had said at the last meeting, and we wanted to make sure we were doing what you wanted us to do. So that's why it's back here. So,
Could you read the motion back?
If we're waiting, can I?
Yes,
If we're
Kathleen.
waiting now, why couldn't we, because this has changed, why couldn't we put this out for bid now instead of saying that there's a timeline for the 2 people that responded at first? Why wouldn't we be able to send this ad out again?
and that would be a policy decision for you all to make. I mean, we're not,
Because if there's other developers that would be able to fulfill what we're looking for here and not the money up front, if that's not what we're gonna be.
I guess in defense of the 2 people that have responded, they've spent a lot of time and money and effort, and they have been continually improving their proposals. So, that would be my only.
Giving them a chance. Don't like it, then we go back. But we did send out requests for proposals to how many people?
I think it was 12 or 15 different.
Only got the 2 responses.
Or was it 20? Okay.
And they were looking at it as requiring the 2.6 up front. And
Yep.
if
Yes.
that's not what we're asking for now, I think they should have a chance to look at it again.
Well, as far as I see, RFP is still what we said. So when we evaluate finally, I mean, that's what I'm going to look at, that what we did ask them for. So,
Well, this is getting very confusing because you're going to look at it one way and we could be looking at it a different way.
well, that's where
I think
voting
everybody's
comes
gonna
from.
look at it through the lens
Yeah.
of how they see it. I
But
think
I
you'll have
guess
8
in
different
terms
ways
of
looking at it.
requirements, I think
I
we do
think
need to be
even-
clear on the requirements.
But I think
Well, I
even you
thought
can
we
go down the
were.
list of requirements.
Yeah,
Because I'll speak for myself. One of my requirements from the beginning of this was that the $2.6 million would be paid. We took $2.6 million out of TIF, and if we don't ask for that back, get it back, we just took $2.6 million out of circulation, which means there's not $2.6 million to go for things that we want to fund with the TIF money.
and if we
Things like a plaza at 1.5.
Yeah. No, I don't have a problem with that. What I'm saying is, because we only got the 2 proposals, only one of which agreed to, or proposed to pay the 2.6 million, are we even going to get any responses? I think we've already gotten that answer.
Well, we go have
If
one.
we're saying that we don't have to have the 2.6 now,
Well, but
Based
the
on-
mayor's saying we have to do it that way.
Well, not just me, there are.
I feel like
yeah,
that was an important part of
Kathy,
agreeing to
Dan,
purchase the
Mark,
property.
I guess maybe others here too. I mean, $2.63 million is said, not as just a piece of change. That's a lot of money, so.
That's not what I'm arguing.
So let me just give you a scenario. So if we had an RFP that came forward, one of the proposals said, all I'm gonna do is buy the property and I'll give you the 2.6 million. I'm not gonna develop it. I'm not gonna do anything with it. Would that be acceptable? That would meet your criteria.
Yeah.
No, because
highest and
there
best
were
use, yeah.
development issues involved in this as well. As
So
the
that's
project-
another requirement then.
No, it's
You're
not.
just, yes, it
All we
is.
said was that the threshold to meet is to repay the 2.6, and then you're gonna develop the process, or develop the property to meet some highest and best use.
Oh, well, that's another
Exactly.
criteria then, highest and best use.
So that means having the maximum value created.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean the maximum value. It
Okay.
means highest and best use, which is a combination of value and land use, appropriate land use.
Okay, all right.
Not-
I can
not quite,
agree with
yeah.
that, so.
Yeah.
Eileen, I don't have the actual wording of the RFP in front of
I
me.
don't actually have it with me either. But
And
we didn't
that's-
say shall. I mean, there were some
That's what I've-
there's some wording that we can go over with Matt and,
Because I didn't
which I
think
didn't
it
do.
was shall.
I don't think it's shall.
And that's what we're arguing about. Was it shall pay it back, or we would prefer that they pay it back? And there's,
Yeah, I didn't bring it with me.
and without
Well,
seeing that wording,
Let's not,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
know-
an important issue.
It is.
If you want, we can talk to Matt, we can get the information to you for your next meeting, and then we can move everything back 2 weeks in terms of the information, and then it comes back to you on February 5th. In other words, you don't, if you'd rather not take action this evening, we can go over the wording with
And actually have
Matt.
copy.
Yeah, and I apologize for
The
not doing that. I didn't realize after the direction we got last time that that would be an issue still, so I apologize. I didn't review it. I didn't bring it with me.
Yeah, well, as a mayor, I think if we say something, we got to follow it. It's really a question of trust for the city. So you can't just change something in the middle of the.
I'm not
middle of
asking
the
to
road,
change
yeah.
something. I want to look at what the actual wording was, and I don't know what the wording was.
That's fair enough.
Well, that's fine. So do you want to defer it then?
I would move that we defer it.
Okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions on that?
So what are
Okay.
you deferring exactly?
This whole decision.
You're deferring the question that's on the agenda?
Yes.
I guess.
Be brought back with the actual documentation of what the RFP was, of the wording.
Another way to deal with this, which you may not like, RFP in itself is nothing more than a request for a proposal. If you don't like the proposals, you can reject them all and start all over.
And we say that in the RFP. Yeah, we do say that.
That would get you out from underneath all the concerns I think you have about getting payback and getting this right and that right and everything else. You're starting from scratch again. Now, starting from scratch requires you to put out an RFP, okay? RFP you can put the wording correctly in the RFP if you're concerned about money. That shouldn't be your highest and best concern on your RFP. Combination of all the things that go into an RFP. It's not one paramount item.
Yeah, and I think what we were trying to do was to get to a point where you all could evaluate what we had. Again, because they have been making the proposals better, by the day. And so we were trying to get them so that they would be comparable, we could compare them, and you could know exactly what, and then you could make a decision whether to further negotiate with one or to go back and start over. But again, in fairness, both developers have put in a lot of time. What we're asking them for is the majority of things they already should have because they used them to respond. We just want it in one place and laid out, and then a little more information about the financial to be able to evaluate the bottom line.
So, but they could still go ahead and ask them to complete the missing information or information which you're asking for, right?
Well, right, but we want it, all in one proposal. So it's complete and says, here's what we're proposing, here's what we would pay, here's what the value would be, here's our reasoning. Again, just.
So you don't really have problem with that, Susan, do you?
I'm not quite understanding what,
She's saying that all they're really asking is to complete whatever is missing there.
yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But I'm saying the RFP did not make the sole requirement paying back. That's what I have a problem with. And that we can't consider proposals that don't propose that.
Well, at a minimum, I mean, it sounds like there's the possibility that you put out a proposal that did set forth what may have been some pretty firm standards,
But did it say they shall do
Well,
it?
that's what,
That's
yeah,
what I
mean,
wanna know.
It does, it seems like we ought to at least understand what our RFP said, and
Okay, so you
That's
think,
what
it's-
I'm asking.
Trying to
I,
so you think that it's a good idea to defer
expect
it
it,
then?
yeah.
That's the phraseology.
Yeah,
You know, to try to make this as clear as possible, neither proposal was totally responsive, and neither is totally responsive now, even with changes and different iterations to the original RFP. So the council's intent wasn't fully met by either proposal. There were aspects of one that didn't meet it, there were aspects of another. Some of you find the aspect of the payment up front to be the most important. Others find, you know, the timing, the design issues that weren't met by the other one to be important as well. So I agree exactly with what Howard was saying. What you're looking for is in your own subjective judgment, which one best meets the overall intent of the request for proposals. And you may say, well, that one isn't as important as all of the other things, or that one is paramount, and without it, you know, I don't support it. To me, you don't have to worry about whether it says shall or not. The RFP is asking for your judgment of what is the best between the two. And each of you will have a different opinion on it. That's fine. But we're just trying to make sure that we get as much information in both proposals so that they're viewed on as much of a similar basis as possible.
And Bill found the language, and here's what it says. The Common Council is responsible for selecting a developer with input from the CDA and Plan Commission, both bodies of which would provide direction throughout the development process. As determined by the Common Council, the selected development team should expect to pay the city purchase price of $2.63 for the assembled development site at the time of the developer selection by the city.
It says should.
It says should.
Should expect to. And that's the first paragraph.
so that's pretty definite.
well, I mean, it certainly doesn't tell people that it will not consider, anything that doesn't propose that. It's certainly softer. But I think really ultimately it comes down to, you know, do you think by what you requested, and the compromises you're willing to make now, do you think if whatever the RFP said, if that would have,
No, don't try to get out of it. Now you said, to begin with, you said shall would be strong.
Right.
So this is should.
should, it's.
Should
yeah,
and
it's
shall.
Right.
So what is?
It's
I mean,
should.
should is just as
Point
strong
us.
as it gets, right?
Anybody who's trying to understand the difference between shall and should.
Okay, the Robert.
Right now, we have a deferral in front of us, request for deferral. I'm ready to vote,
Okay,
and I'll just tell you, I'm going to vote no against the deferral. But if you want to keep talking about it, you can. I just wanted to throw that out there that I
okay, well, that's like
Well,
calling
the reason for
questions.
deferral was to find out what the language was, and now we found
Yeah,
out
we
what
know
the
the
language
language.
is.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would draw the deferral since we
Okay.
found out the language.
thank you.
Second.
Okay, so then the motion is to give staff a time to collect all the information, and then they have the timeline. So then we are back to the original motion. All those in favor of the original motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so,
Roll call? We have a roll call, please.
okay.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
No.
Ramsey?
No.
Sullivan?
No.
Bouchard?
Aye.
4-4. So I is to, okay, so if I say, if it fails, what
Either
happens?
vote
then?
yes or no.
Well, if it fails, then no action is taken, somebody can make. Right now, the motion is for staff to go back and negotiate further as proposed on this timeline. And so if you say aye, then that will be what happened. If you vote no, then nothing is going to happen until somebody makes some other motion.
Okay, I'm going to say no. So that motion fails. So now, does somebody else want to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to send the RFP out again. Their developers.
I would like to second that with the caveat that we bring that RFP back here and strengthen the language and figure out what the decision criteria are before it goes out for bid, out for proposal.
You know, if you really wanted to do it, and you wanted to get really technical, you could start weighing the value of each requirement that's in there. That's a very difficult job to do, but if you really want to do it, you can do that. Then you come up with less a subjective and more of an analytical approach to which one you're gonna have and which one you're not. But if you just simply want to put it out and strengthen the language or change some of the points of the language so that they, if they're laid in front of multiple people, they can be viewed as equal.
Since that's not on the agenda, Matt, does that have to be a future agenda where they reject both proposals?
Well, I think that's within the subject
Oh, okay,
matter.
okay. I just want to make sure.
I mean, I probably
glad we
rejection of the other proposal should be implicit in that, but I think they can make the motion to
Okay,
ask staff to come back with,
I just wanted to make sure we were.
on a future agenda to look at,
Draft
sending
up
out a new
another RFP.
It's related to this subject matter.
Part of this, I think you're right, Howard, it needs to figure out how to make, get agreement on it. And if there's so much for finance, or if there's so much for aesthetics, if there's so much for workforce housing, whatever it is, we need to be able to have a weighted score so that most of this subjectivity.
Including timeline too, of completion.
And that's what we did for the downtown redevelopment, the Cayuga area. There was a weighted matrix that was created. Yeah.
Okay, Robert.
Who's going to work on this to make sure it happens? Is it just asking city staff to go do this on their own and come back to us? Are we going to get involved ourselves to make sure that the direction is made very clear to city staff and to the developers who have kind of been rung through the process here? How are we going to get this information quickly turned around and with a direction that we all are happy with?
Well, I think you approved the RFP before, and it would certainly come back here for you to approve it again, or
I
a
guess I'm
revised
asking,
one.
sorry, I guess I'm asking, are we just saying, go Eileen, and
No, we have
come
to
back
give
in a
her
month?
No, we've got to give her direction.
Robert, you have something you want
I
to?
was gonna ask Mike a question. Is the candle burning on this, such that, this has to be done in the next few weeks? What's your opinion?
Well, we pushed for the fastest timeline on this, or I pushed for it, because I read the council's wanting to get as much value out of this property as we could.
Sure.
Life of TID 5.
Okay, yeah, so,
That timeline shrinks with every month or every year that we're not able to do that. On the other hand, we have tenants who probably would like to stay there longer if they could. And we certainly are now getting to the point where we could do that because we're not going to have a development project come spring. So there are some decisions that we need to make like that, because we do have several tenants that are there now. We have a property manager who's under contract through the end of March for that property. So we're gonna have to make probably a change to the property management contract, and maybe a look at extending leases as well for the tenants. So I mean, the way I read this vote is that essentially you're rejecting both development proposals at this point.
correct.
It would be helpful, I think, because Matt says it's a related topic, if you just say that up front, and then we work on revising an RFP that we could bring back to the council for a subsequent approval, along with the matrix to standardize the review process.
given the time of the year it's coming up on now, is this realistic in the next few weeks? Or should we look at this sometime?
I would suggest that we bring it back to you on January 15th. And I think it'll take us probably a while to update that, come up with a matrix, and
Come up with those,
on January 15th, I'd like to bring back to you then, if that's where we're at. An extension of leases with current tenants and an extension of the property management agreement that we have in place.
So could we at that time look at the proposals in hand as well or not? Or that's,
There's no proposals to look at.
If you reject them, no.
You just rejected them.
Now, we'd have to issue another RFP and go through another process if in fact the council's intent is to reject these two proposals.
I think our vote does de facto reject both. I think that's what the vote did with the mayor making the decision.
That doesn't mean, though, that they couldn't come back the next time with all the information that we're asking for. The plans could come back. Yes.
No,
my intent was.
no, not until you issue another RFP.
Right,
You
that's
just
what I meant.
rejected all of it.
That's what I mean. With the RFP, they could bring back their plans again
council
with the
needs
new
to,
RFP.
council needs to explicitly.
And others,
Issue the.
yeah.
Emily?
Before you get to that, I want to say something. After knocking hundreds of doors in my district and the cry for affordable housing in our town, we're now delaying these projects by months, if not 6 months, 9 months. That's a year, thank you. That's adding to the cost of the renters because the supply is limited. So every time we make steps like this, and maybe it's more of a, please remember this for the next time you do it. We need to be sensible to the people who are in our community, who are trying to pay their rents and trying to get to the American dream. Please, please be considerate of that as you go and reject this. I'm very saddened to hear this.
Yeah, okay.
Because of the cost of this property, it may not be the suitable place to put the workforce housing. You know, maybe because the numbers won't work out. If this is what we paid for it, I expect to get that back. And if workforce housing doesn't work in this instance, there are other areas in the city that could be workforce housing that aren't as expensive as this property.
Yeah, Emily?
Perhaps on University, where we rejected another developer. Where does it stop? Where is it not a place that we can't have affordable housing? And I'm not trying to attack you. I do appreciate you saying that. Maybe it's not. But I'm worried because every time we say, this doesn't work here, what are we saying to the people who live here?
Yeah, in this case, it's the question of cost. I think the place, nobody mind. I think the site isn't the problem. Yes, Joanna?
Well, I totally agree with Emily on, if this is in the TIF, workforce housing should be a component of this. There is no other place for workforce housing to be considered if we don't do it in the TIF. If we do it anywhere else, we have no way for the city to help out with that effort to make that policy goal. So I think that as people are thinking of this as a restriction for the 2.6, they are restricting what type of property this will be. If we want outlandish, expensive apartments, that's what you're gonna get. You're gonna get another series of places that people cannot afford. The rents in downtown Middleton now are really outrageous. And most of us here at the table could not afford them. So we need to consider affordable housing in Middleton, or else or we will die from within.
Okay, and to follow up
Yes,
on
Susan.
that, when Jacob put forth Stagecoach Trails apartment building, he did not have affordable housing in there. We asked that it be put in as part of the TIF. we've been doing that for quite a few of these TIF projects. So are we now going to start changing our policy on that?
But he could make those numbers work with that property.
With the TIF.
I guess the problem is that when we didn't seem to have a vision when we were buying this property. There were, I think, 10 or 15 businesses which were in these two sites there. It's, of course, it's water under the bridges, but, you know, we bought that for 2.65 million without really knowing what we want to do with it, so.
I totally disagree with that. We had a vision for that.
What
And
was-
if you don't know what that vision was, it's very disturbing. A vision was this was going to be the gateway to downtown. And we wanted something that was going to be a signature. And because it's in the TIF, all the policy requirements of the TIF are going to be added. So workforce housing is part of the TIF policy and part of our goals. Those are all still there. It's still part of the TIF. And in addition to that, we had the vision that it was the gateway to downtown.
But we didn't put that in RFP. I mean, that should have been a part of RFP if that's what we had
Oh,
wanted.
I think we did have
yeah.
language in
I think we
there about
did.
the TID. Again, I don't have it in front of me, but I think we did.
TID 5.
Yeah, about TID 5. I think Joanna's right.
But not in RFP, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Not in RFP itself.
No, I
mean,
think it
that
was.
wasn't-
I think it talked about the TID 5,
It
the
asks for
goals.
the developers to meet the goals of TID 5.
Mhm.
Okay, any other, the motion is, rebid, is that the what is the motion, Michelle?
Motion to issue revised RFP and matrix.
Was that made by the council?
No,
Mark, I made the motion to send it back out for bid, but Mark wanted to add RFP, I'm sorry, RFP. But Mark wanted to add that we strengthen the language within it,
And create a scoring matrix
yes.
prior to being sent out.
Yes, Howard.
I think Matt somewhere mumbled something about, correct me if I'm wrong. Trying to think of the wording here. Rejecting rejecting the two proposals.
Well, I mean, I think that's implicit in what you've done, but if you would like to make that explicit,
I would think it would be beneficial to us to do that when people are looking at what we have done and how we did it on this process. I think we should do that. It may be implicit, but
I would not disagree with you.
So do you want to
Do you?
make that amendment to the motion then?
I think you need two different motions.
Oh, okay, okay, all right.
First you get rid of the old
Okay.
thing, and then you say, okay, we're gonna form a new union, and away we go. So now we gotta get rid of the old one first.
But we are doing just the opposite here then.
That was Kathy's motion then, right? So. are
I
you-
think Howard's asking, I
He
think
wants-
Howard's asking that we dispense with the proposals on the table first.
Yep.
So are you making that motion, Howard?
I will make a motion that we, reject the two proposals.
Okay, need a second?
Pretty simple.
Need a second? Okay, so there's no second.
Okay.
So let's say if we come up with a criteria, could we still evaluate these two proposals at that time?
They would have to resubmit.
They will have to resubmit it.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so you guys, we all know the motion, right?
No.
Well,
Okay, okay, go ahead and read the motion again, please.
Motion to issue revised RFP, scoring plan, and matrix.
so we're issuing it, so that's the motion, not that we're developing one for council to then approve?
I think we need,
Yeah, develop
we
it,
need to
develop.
The
Develop
motion is
one.
to develop a new RFP
RFP.
with a scoring matrix. Then I think the discussion that ensued after that was, do we need any more detail to staff and how to forward that goal. Would you like staff to take the existing proposal, maybe draw up something that has a matrix attached to it to give you something more to discuss, or just, we're gonna put this back at a new meeting and you will, from the existing proposal, come back and just discuss something else?
I think we need to see a matrix.
Yeah.
Some kind of, otherwise we're just gonna go around and around.
Round, yeah.
Because really what's happening here is we're having a discussion of which proposal. You can go around the table and you can basically tell who's falling where. And we're already having that discussion. So if we're gonna do this, then we need to have a matrix to actually sit and discuss, so we don't go around and around with the same conversation. Or the next meeting will just be doing the same thing.
Same split.
The matrix, if you're going to base your decision on one of the multiple things, a matrix of how you're going to judge the responses to your questions, which we all have to do. You sure as the heck want to see it before you send it out.
Right.
Okay, so now everybody knows what the motion is then, right?
We know what the motion is, but there's a big elephant in the room here that you're not addressing through this motion. And that is the most significant issue of debate has been, do we want the money up front? And if that is that important to the 5 who voted to reject, staff needs to know that, so that when we develop the RFP, we're not debating it again a month from now.
I'm gathering by the discussion of a matrix that's maybe a factor that might rank or score very highly, but perhaps not.
Could be a prerequisite too.
But high enough scores on other aspects may.
Let's face it, there's at least 9 subjective differences of opinion here as what's important. And some of you are closer and some of you are closer than another, but if you don't give us direction, how do we know what's if that's the most important criterion for the council on this project?
Okay, Susan.
Yeah, I'm hearing that there's some members seem to think that's the only criteria. We've already put out an RFP that said we should get payment up front. We got 2 responses. That's telling me that very likely was the reason why we didn't get responses. More responses. Therefore, we can put it back out and say they shall pay it up front, and we will get a response from Terrence. And I think we want to have more. I'm disappointed we don't have more proposals to look at, but I think we need to not make that an absolute exclusive so that we can get multiple proposals and choose the one that's the best. Because it's not just will someone pay the money. That's where we end up, someone being able to pay the money, hold onto the piece of land potentially for 20 years and nothing happens.
Any other? Well, I would say, I can say that.
I'm sorry. The discussions, what we agreed to was that we were gonna do 2 distinct transactions. The first was a land sale to the developer for the 2.6. The second transaction.
That wasn't in the RFP.
The second
Finish,
transaction
please.
was that they would propose something that would provide the highest and best use for the property. And we would evaluate that like we evaluated any other TIF project. And so I'm confused how these have gotten merged together, because I can clearly remember that there was agreement that the first obstacle to take care of was to get us out of this principle of land sale. And once that was done, then all of the objectives of TIF 5, any of the policy things that people wanted to put in there, were all available based on what could be done with the property once it was held by the developer.
But that wasn't in the RFP as being an absolute requirement.
I think when,
So we have to deal with that fact.
I think from what I remember, when we were approving the sale price, I think we made it very clear if we were to go back in that resolution that the city council wanted that money paid up front. We can go back and look at that particular motion at that time, so. Yeah, I guess, you know, if city is paying $2.65 million, I'm not going to give that land for free to someone, so that's my position,
You
so.
made a mistake on the RFP, and it should have said the developer shall pay 2.6 million.
Well, somebody,
Didn't.
they use the word should, so I guess it's a question between shall and should, so.
So Matt, I have a concern here with how Mark just laid that out. So then the first transaction would be, we would just sell the property at 2.6, and the developer doesn't have to do anything more, because now they own the property. And if they want to sit on it, they can sit on it, because they don't get to stage 2, because now we've lost control of it, because they've just bought it from us.
Right.
Only thing is that the TIF has a only certain length of time, more they
No,
delay.
there's nothing about the TIF. It's a purchase. You've
Well,
just bought the property.
But they still,
There's nothing we can do about it anymore. It's not ours.
no, it will be approved by the city. It doesn't, they can't just sit on it or do nothing about it.
Well, but it's not our property anymore. We just sold it to get our price back. If it's a transaction and it's step 1 and step 2, you never get to step 2 because you've just lost control of step 2.
That's the way you do it, step 1 and step 2. The only incentive to come back and immediately develop is your carrying costs of the property.
So if
But-
you're a
but I-
developer and you want to sit on it because you want to jack up your rental properties and other pieces of property you own adjacent in that same market, you would do that. You could do that.
So many developers that'll sit on $2.6 million of holding costs.
It's also-
Terrence, you're here. Would you sit on 2.6?
He's sitting on a lot in Bishop's Bay.
He's
That's
not.
not developing.
He's not sitting on. He does not have carrying costs for Bishop's Bay. Jacob, would you sit on 2.6?
By tenants paying leases, you're not sitting on it, you're covering your costs with what you're getting in income.
Yeah,
If I did with those
That's
houses
true.
on Stagecoach, I rented them out until.
So that means.
So you'd have the same properties, just a new owner.
You're not going to be sitting on a $2.65 million worth of land, right? So you will actually do something with that property.
The question is whether or not those buildings are occupiable, which they're occupied right now. So you could, yes, buy it, continue to rent it as they are, what's the difference?
Could I suggest if you want
Yes.
the developers to come forward, that they should speak into the microphone?
Oh, okay.
Capture it for the video?
Okay, do we want any of them to speak?
Not important.
Okay, all right. Okay, so are we ready to vote now, or if there is some more questions or comments?
Just a question, it sounds like you want us to interpret what you want on the sale of the property, so I guess we're just gonna have to try to interpret it.
Yes, Emily.
If you're going to interpret it, besides concerning the money, which is important, I would also like you to consider workforce housing, transit plans, and if it's pedestrian and bike friendly. And I think both proposals have some versions of that. Please rank those as well. Thank you.
So, Mike, would you like maybe each of the council member, if they want to provide the input, they can send it to the staff?
Well, it should be done in a public meeting. I don't think it should be done privately.
Okay,
No, that's true, yeah.
but,
If we don't get in a public meeting, how does the public know how
okay,
you feel about that?
okay, but not now, right? This is not the time.
It could be now, you're giving us direction.
Okay, well, do you want, anybody wants to?
I would prefer that maybe what you should do is to if everybody has their own priorities here, that we develop a list of what council members consider to be their priorities, come back at the next meeting, and everybody can rank them. And we can rank them on a spreadsheet in public. So you'll have 8 columns and however many rankings, and then at the end of the day, we can score each of the rankings.
Seems fair to me. Is that how we want to do? I think that's a, a rational way of dealing with it. Is that okay with you, Mike?
Do you have a list that you'd like to have us score? I think from the, right?
All I'm trying to point out is the most significant issue that you've talked about that is a point of difference among the council is the issue of whether or not we need to have money up front in a proposal. That does affect how many developers will submit a proposal. I just talked with one today who said that they would have submitted a proposal had they known that we would consider not having the dollar amount up front. So to me, that's the most significant issue. That the others, I think, are pretty straightforward on that whole list that Eileen has developed, staff has developed, that is before you. To me, those are all pretty straightforward.
So you could have a list.
We do have a list, and it's before you right now. It's the list that Eileen and the staff put together. It's the last 2 pages of the council packet. Project details, project timeline, property acquisition, budget valuation, financials, and tax increment plans. I don't hear anybody complain about anything other than the issue of the sale of the property and when the city gets the money. We don't get direction from you on that, and I think you all know where you stand now. Then we'll just delay.
I would like to see the other proposals, but we're on the 2 ends of the spectrum. We have all the money up front, and then it's the workforce housing one that it's just not getting any money up front. And I could
not
compromise.
That's not
Well,
true.
they will, but it's a long payback time. And I would be willing to look at all the money within a reasonable payback time.
What do you consider reasonable?
I don't know.
Then
Oh, but that gets into why you have a scoring system, so you're not necessarily
Yeah.
predefining how much other benefits may weigh against your timeframe. I think, what Mike seems to be talking about is really a decision for the council of whether now whether that is a absolute prerequisite, or are you willing to consider, if offset by another things, a longer payback time, and if so, and if the possibility of getting other proposals that would have some other payback period, but maybe some potentially other benefits, if you'd want to see those, then you need an RFP that says that the immediate payback of that cost is not, a hard prerequisite. It is merely a factor that is, the sooner the better, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yes, Emily.
I think that brings us back to should.
Pardon me?
I think that brings us back to should versus shall.
Yeah.
Well, right, and that is what was asked, but apparently if we are hearing from other developers that interpreted should as maybe a much stronger should than others did, that perhaps there are all kinds of proposals out there that you did not have the opportunity to see.
All you had to do is call staff, and you could've got the
Yeah,
answer. That's what I did. So,
Right,
you call staff and say, hey, Abby, this is what it says.
Please go to the mic if you like.
I think regardless of what other developers are saying now after they've seen what's been submitted, and now they're like, oh, God, we should have done something. That's besides the point. I don't care if you go out to another RFP or not. I've got enough stuff keeping me busy that this deal isn't going to make or break my day. But the point is, it said you should. If you had a question, it said call Abby. It's a simple 2-second call. Hey, Abby, I'm going to submit a proposal, but it's not going to be at the full purchase price. Here's my rationale for why you guys overpaid for this land by $1.8 million. And should I still submit a proposal? Well, yeah, that's something the council will consider. So I think, you need to be a little careful with saying, hey, it says you absolutely have to. in the RFP because you guys had council meetings months before and had that discussion there. It's not in the RFP. So that's my point on that.
Howard?
Thank you.
I'm wondering if tinkering with payment or whatever you want to call it is something that should be defined a little better. And what I mean by that is, if you said that the city, my numbers are gonna be wrong, but is hanging out for 2 million and something or 3 or whatever, heck ever it is. Propose how you would repay that amount and, when you would repay that amount, so that you give some flexibility to the people that are responding to your RFP. If you nail down that number right at the top, up front, you're gonna get probably the same thing as you've got now, not very many people interested in it. But you might find more interest in it, I'm just speculating, if they, in addition to all the other things that they have to include in there, that they are, can include a repayment schedule of some amount so that you know by whenever you're gonna get your money back. Just throwing that out.
Okay. I don't think anybody likes what we have. Robert, yes.
Just for, this is getting into a specific, but how many stories are we allowed to even offer? I mean, if somebody were to build a 16-story building in that space, you can bring down costs quite a bit. Obviously, I don't think that's an option. Is 4 stories kind of like, some of these things will affect other things, obviously. The cost of the per unit, the studio versus 1 bedroom versus 2 bedroom is dependent on space available. Somebody help guide me, because if we're gonna be rating these things, there aren't all standalone items, they interrelate.
And a lot of times, the issue, is that all right if I talk, by the way? A lot of times, when we're looking at stories, it's gonna be constrained by parking. That's one thing. And then the other is, how does it fit in, which is a part of the aesthetics and the gateway to downtown. How does that fit in with the adjacent properties and as a gateway to downtown? So those two things, I guess, parking and aesthetics are.
Height because of the airport.
Right.
So
But
16.
it can usually be
16.
16,
Grade 16.
as long as you have like a.
To your question, Robert, the 2 proposals deal with parking in very different ways. One of which costs a lot more to the developer, and the other of which does not, because they're dealing with the environmental contaminants on the site differently. One is trucking it off-site, the other one is trying to manage primarily on-site. And so that affects the overall cost, so that the height affects the amount of parking, which affects the amount of underground parking, which affects the environmental costs. All of those are interrelated.
Well said.
So I guess if I can keep talking for a moment then.
Yes, Robert.
How are we as, I mean, you all know I'm an engineer, but I'm not this kind of engineer. How are we as non-experts going to give guidance? And some of these things, I think it's going to narrow down to like 5 or 6 things maybe that we can give guidance on. Everything else is going to come out in the wash, because I'm not an expert on how one thing affects another thing. I don't have a solution. I'm asking the question of the group of 9 to say, what do we want here? What can we really do? Because we're going down a path where I don't know how to give direction to city staff on this either.
Well, Mike,
Thoughts?
you want to respond?
Wait,
I mean,
what was your question? again?
My question is, how are we going to restrict this to, maybe, 3 or 4 items that we can make a decision on to give some guidance to city staff who know what they're doing. Because I can't talk too much about some of these topics.
I would go to what's important to the council and to the future of the city. I would consider what's important to the voters. I would consider what's important to the citizens that live here. I would consider what we all talk about in being a good neighbor city. And those things that pop out, I know that you've all have worked very hard on your environmentalism in years past, which is why going forward it's been so hard with the year of flood. I know that public safety is very important, so you want to make sure it's a secure location. But I would say to you, I would consider balancing, because if you're going to have a sustainability location and something that's affordable for people who work and live here or nearby, but you also have to think of future costs. So that parking versus mass transit or biking or walking, you have to figure that out for yourself, and you have to know your district.
One of the problem which I found out was that because of these housing regulations, you can't really require that the affordable housing in this case that it should be, you know, rented to people who work here. So, which is, it can be anybody from anywhere. So.
Oh, yes, I clarify. I didn't mean only restrict. I meant that they could choose to so live here.
Sure.
They
Yeah, that
wanted
would
to.
be great. That's what I would like. So are we ready to vote then? It's developing the matrix and using that matrix to evaluate any future proposals. And the city will come up with some of those items in the matrix, and we're going to look at it at next or whatever first meeting in January, or when would we look at that matrix, Mike?
I think January 15th. And I would bring back then proposal to extend the leases to the existing tenants and to extend the property management agreement as well. Because there's no way this can be done by the end of March.
Any other thoughts? Okay, otherwise, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Okay, so it doesn't go anywhere, so. So then we need another motion, or do we just end it? Could we just adjourn?
Nothing of any kind to happen. No.
You know, you can, move adjourn, and that'll solve your problem.
One problem.
Okay, can we go back to the two original proposal?
Making a motion?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay,
Solve this problem.
all those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.